Greetings, artists and art supporters. I personally want to welcome you virtually to Hendersonville, North Carolina. I'm here today in Woodlands Gallery in historic downtown Hendersonville, helping to carry on the 61-year tradition that is Art on Main. As you can see, the show looks a little different this year. The Arts Council of Henderson County has worked hard to recreate this in-person event on a virtual platform. Today you can enjoy interviews with all the artists in the show, listen to music by local performers, and watch artists' demonstrations, all from the comfort of your home. Don't forget to make time to join our artists in their virtual showrooms from 1 to 4 p.m. Thank you for joining us today for Art on Main, the virtual fine art and fine craft fair. Enjoy the show.
Greetings, artists and art supporters. Hannah Duncan here from the Arts Council of Henderson County. I wanted to thank you for tuning in to our virtual show and walk you quickly through how the show will work. On September 26th and 27th, the show will begin both days at 11 a.m. You can watch the main show from our YouTube page, the Arts Council of Henderson County Facebook page, or our website, www.artonmainNC.com. At 1 p.m., you can join our artists in the virtual showrooms simply by clicking a link that will be provided and posted on our website, through an email, and posted on our social media pages. The showroom is essentially one giant Zoom room where you can meet each artist in a breakout room. At 4 p.m., the virtual showrooms will close and you can join us back on our YouTube page, the Arts Council of Henderson County Facebook page, or our website, www.artonmainNC.com, for the rest of the show. This will be the schedule for both days of the event. Make sure that you tune in on Sunday morning to see the award ceremony and take some time to explore the virtual gallery to get a taste of what the artists create. Spend a little bit more time exploring our artist pages and click on the artist website links to see what work they have available to purchase. The Arts Council of Henderson County is a nonprofit community organization that promotes, advocates for, and nurtures the arts in Henderson County and Western North Carolina. Your tax-deductible donations help our organization provide programs that keep our community creative. If you are enjoying the show, we ask that you first make sure to support our artists by buying their work. And if you feel inclined to do so, we would greatly appreciate the support to help us continue our mission. Thank you again for supporting the arts, and stay creative.
I got started in photography kind of out of a necessity to create. I lived in Florida. I ran a small home-based recording studio for a few years. When I moved to North Carolina, the house that I moved to happened to be kind of under the final approach for the regional airport, and it was not really conducive to a recording studio setting with airplanes flying overhead. So I one day went out to the local Best Buy and picked up a camera, made a commitment to go out on the weekends when I had free time and kind of explore the region. As I was out exploring these beautiful places, I would go home and I'd post the images online and I'd research more places, but then I'd see that everyone else with the camera was also taking the exact same photos that I was, from the exact same locations of the exact same beautiful waterfalls and sunsets. When I was visiting some friends and family back down in Florida, we were driving around looking for some interesting places to photograph down there, and ran across this old airplane graveyard. A friend and I pulled over and there was a little break in the fence. So we kind of wiggled our way through and started exploring this small little piece of land with these airplanes. And that moment right there for me just instantly got me hooked. Like a kid in a candy store climbing up inside these old airplanes And so from that moment on, I knew that that's the type of subject matter that I wanted to photograph. So getting access to these old buildings is probably the hardest, most difficult part of what I do. When I first started off, and it was still just a hobby, I would obviously sneak into a lot of different places. Once I started doing this full time, I tried to commit to doing it as legally as possible. At that point, I started to reach out to the owners of these buildings. I'd also found great success over the years in partnering with historic preservation groups. When I first started off full time, I went on a road trip with one of my best friends, and Memphis was one of the first stops on our road trip. I'd actually reached out to the preservation group to get some contact info from the owners, and we were able to photograph one of the first buildings that I shot there was the Tennessee Brewery. I ended up sending all the images that I took from these buildings back to the preservation group, and they just loved the idea that they could share these images, which were kind of captured and created to showcase the beauty of these places, and to paint them in a positive light. And over the last 10 years now, every time I go to Memphis, they have a different preservation project, a different building that they're trying to save. And it's been great to be able to watch some of these buildings, such as the brewery, and actually the church, which is on the computer screen back here. Both of those locations now have actually been fully restored and have been, brought back to life. And so it's been fascinating to kind of watch these places come back to life and also be a small part of the preservation efforts that are put in to save these places. Grossinger's Resort was definitely one of the places that kind of helped me form the overall vision that the whole series would eventually kind of come into. And just everywhere you looked, it was like you could just stand there and look around and you felt like you were the last person on earth. But at the same time, you could imagine the people that were once there and just the bustling, thriving nature of the resort. And this was one of the most famous Jewish resorts up in the Catskills that films like Dirty Dancing were inspired by. So many comedians got their start on the stage at Grossinger's. Musical acts from all over the country would go through there, and even different sports figures would go and spend the summers training there. When we were first there in 2009, it was relatively untouched by people. It was basically, there was moss and grass growing up on the tile work inside the pool. The old lounge chairs that people would have sat in around the pool were still sitting there. You could see the beautiful chandeliers and stuff still hanging up on the ceiling. And it was just absolutely spectacular place. About 2 years ago or so, the city actually went in and ended up tearing down everything that was remaining there. The entire place now is gone. Events like that, though, really drive me to be proactive and to get out there and find these places, because in some cases, I'm one of the last people to go through some of these buildings before they're torn down or before they fall down or burn down in some cases. The success stories that we've had with some of these Memphis properties and a few other ones are definitely the exception to the rule, that too often these places just don't get the love and attention that they really need and deserve. Their time with us is limited. From the beginning, I've utilized a photographic technique called high dynamic range photography. And it's not something I use in all of my images, but a lot of these scenes where you have the contrast of an indoor setting or an indoor light versus an outdoor setting and an outdoor light, that creates a very large dynamic range of light in a scene that can be difficult to capture that full range of light with just a single exposure. So what high dynamic range photography does is allows the photographer to capture multiple images that range from very dark all the way to very bright, and then blend those images together into a single file in post-production. And that single file contains all of that light data that you've captured across that full range. And so as an artist, that allows me to kind of go in and balance the light in some of these scenes. When I look at these buildings or the airplanes or anything like that, I don't see a pile of junk. I look at it and I can kind of imagine the stories that these places once held, imagine the people that were once associated with them. And I tried to kind of bring that out in my work. With the case of historic preservation, oftentimes that viewing a property or viewing a scene like that in a positive light can be the impetus that is needed to garner some interest. with restoring a place. If someone can kind of start to visualize the magnitude and the majesty of some of these places. When I first get to a scene, I'll usually put all my camera gear down and just walk around the building without any cameras to distract me. So by not having the camera at all, it allows me the freedom to just take in and kind of feel the building out a little bit. As I go through the day, I'll actually switch different lenses out. So I'll walk around with the wide angle lens at first and kind of photograph a bunch of wide angle scenes. And then I'll put on a very narrow macro lens and photograph some detail shots. Sometimes when I'm just going for the obvious shot, I try to think of that and say, okay, what's not the obvious shot here? What's the weird shot? What's a weird, funky angle that I can get at, or climb up into, or go down underneath, or something like that, and try to just challenge yourself as an artist to think differently and to not go with just what's the easiest situation. I'm just very thankful every day that something that I've been so passionate about and something that I would have done regardless is also being so well received by other people out there. So it's definitely a blessing. Hi, my name is Walter Arnold. I am a photographer from Hendersonville, North Carolina. And for the last 10 years, I've been creating a photographic series called The Art of Abandonment. You can find all of my work at artofabandonment.com.
I grew up in a small town in Minnesota, 3,000 people. In a large family, I have 5 brothers and 2 sisters, and now 2 stepsisters as well. I lived 25 plus years outside of Boston with my husband of now 31 years. I've been a full-time artist for 5 years now since we moved to Greenville. I've always been kind of creative, artsy, craftsy kind of stuff. My mother was an artist and a writer and a musician, so I got some of it, not all of it. And I kind of started with an altered book. When we moved here, we lived in a really drab apartment while our house was being rehabbed. And I didn't have a studio, so I had 1 tub of supplies and an old dictionary. And so I started using vintage materials like old sheet music and ticket stubs and just stuff, ephemera that I've had collected, and started building collages in the pages. So when I finally got my studio, I was able to start really expanding on the idea of building a story based on things that people collect. So, you know, you keep all those old cards and you keep all those ticket stubs and all those things, but they sit in a drawer, or eventually they get thrown away, maybe a scrapbook. And I just wanted to use those to tell a story, whether it's a story I've made up in my head or, you know, so one of my first series was a collection based on a collection of greeting cards that this woman collected from 2 men in 1950. And it was their story. It was a love triangle, 2 men sending her cards. And so that's from there that's evolved. And now I'm actually excited because I use a lot of my own family photos. So like my grandparents, great grandparents, my mother and her friends, some photos that my father has taken. So that's really how it's kind of evolving, is to use more personal things in them. I'm not very good at realism. I'm not very good at drawing. And so I really wanted to be able to express myself in a way that didn't involve a lot of realism or anything like that. And I know abstract art is beautiful, but that kind of wasn't my thing either. So I realized that I could tell stories through the collections of materials that I had, and then adding to that with layers and layers of acrylic paint and ink and modeling paste, and just to get texture and to build up the layers. So, and I try to use all original vintage materials. So when you see one of my paintings, if the background is all torn papers and stuff, it's probably from a 1950s Farmer's Almanac and a grain elevator receipt from my grandfather, and you know, old sheet music and different sewing patterns and things like that. So I try to use originals as much as possible, of course, unless it's really precious, and then I will use a photocopy. You know, I don't want to destroy someone's only family photo. I usually start my work one of 2 ways. I'm either inspired by a photograph, like a family photograph or something like that, or something that somebody gives me, or I realize that I have a pile of things related to this subject matter. So a beach thing, like I have a whole collection of flyers and ads from Myrtle Beach from the 1960s. So I'm like, oh, I should do something beachy, because that's kind of a beach thing. Once I've kind of got a theme going, then I find papers that are associated with the photograph, or a photograph that fits the material. So once I have the photograph, I'll scan it in and make an inkjet copy because that works best for the photo imaging transfer technique that I do. But I'll start with an artist board. I used to work on canvas, now I'm using board, and I will use gel medium to lay down pieces of paper. So I tear things into maybe inch by inch pieces and do layer, overlap, layering, overlap, layer. Once I have the whole thing covered in papers, then I'll do maybe a wash. I might do some stamping with some ink just to build up some texture in the background. Then I may do another layer of paint, some more stamping, maybe add some modeling paste through a stencil, which gives it some texture. And then I generally do like a horizon line in it, and then you place the photo somewhere along that horizon line so they're set somewhere. So the image transfer I do is I take the laser copies and do a gel medium transfer either onto other vintage paper, maybe onto vintage wallpaper, and then remove the white paper, and then that's the image transfer that I put onto the piece. So it's a little slightly raised, so it gives it a little texture. One of my favorite things to do is commission work for clients. So people have their own collection of family photos, and they'll bring a few to me or send a few of them online, and we'll have a conversation about the type of image that we want to use. You want to have it to be higher contrast, but I can play with things with Photoshop, which I often do, mess around with the contrast and the brightness. And then we talk about the person that's in them or people that are in them and what are their interests. You know, do they like history? Are they a Civil War buff? Do they like the beach? Do they, did they used to sew? Those kind of things. And I try to put together materials that relate to the person, or sometimes they have their own materials already. I had one client that brought me a whole banker box full of letters that his parents wrote to each other when he was in the service. And he allowed me to use some of the originals to put in the background because he had so many. And those are some of my favorite pieces because I not only got to know my client, but I got to know his parents and their love story and how fantastic that was. So doing the commission work is really, really exciting. One of my really, really favorite pieces is my piece I called Tan Lines. That is a photo of my mother, my aunt, and their two friends in 1956 at a beach that my father took the photo. And the women are all exposing their backs and you can see their tan lines, which if you knew my mother, that was very risque for her. To be able to take that photo that my father took that is of my mother was kind of a turning point for me, I think. Then I really realized it's like, I really love to use these old photos, and I keep trying to find more and more of family photos that I can use. So that's probably one of my favorite pieces. Hi, my name is Suzanne Wolf, and I'm a mixed media artist in Greenville, South Carolina. You can find my work at Art Mob Studios in Hendersonville, North Carolina, and also at my website, SuzanneWolf.com.
My name is Roberto Benguechea. I'm from Colombia, South America. The name of the city is Barranquilla. I came to this country in 1968 without English and without nothing. And I stumbled into a person who had a jewelry manufacturing thing. This man was looking for another designer. He only had one designer in Miami. And she was always consistent, the same designs, the same things. So I was staying in his house for 3 or 4 days. I was on my way back to New York. I had a job with my best friend over there waiting for me. And he asked me if he could ask the women who work for him, that does the design, if I could watch her for 3 days.
Waxing.
Doing the waxing. Waxing is the first thing that you do in the jewelry business. So I went with that woman for 3 days, and I call it spitting bullets because she was talking to me, and bearing in mind I came from Colombia, don't speak no English, and she's just going like a machine gun to me. So I put her out of my ears, but I pay attention to what she was doing, and so I did pay attention. And after the third day, he says, it's 9 o'clock. I'm going to leave you here. I'm going to give you 10 stones. And you have all the tools in here on this table that other person who you learned from, who were taught to have. And so he says, I'll be back by 7 p.m. surprised me. Hey, I never done this before. This is not a thing for me. He says, look, I don't care what you say. I'm leaving. I come back at 7 o'clock. Surprise me. Now he says the other woman who does for him, she gave him 3 designs per day. So when he came back at 7, he had 8 designs. And he flipped out because they were totally different than what that other person does. So he says, that's it. You call your friend in New York. You're not going to New York. You're staying here. I pay you. You stay with me. You'll be good. I'll make you a better person. And so I started to work for him at twice, 3 times the speed that the other women had. And I was so totally different. So we moved in here without a name or without anything. And the first thing that we decided that we were going to do for our store was the name. And since I get excited by the visions that the Almighty showed me in his creation, I decided I was going to put the name of my business was going to be Visions of Creation. So in honor of the Almighty Father who give me those visions in his creation. So basically that makes me an imitator, not a designer.
What I have in his marketing is he does the job of 5 people. And I know there's plenty of other artists that do the same thing. They're all creative in their own way. He does the designing, he does the waxing, he does the casting, he does the stone setting, he does the polishing and shining. So he does the work of 4 or 5 people. Because of the knowledge and the skill that he has, you can come in on a Friday morning and meet with him. He'll do the design with you. He'll send you away for a cup of coffee for an hour. You'll come back, he'll have the wax ready and say, okay, I'll have your actual piece ready for you at 4 o'clock the next day, completed. And that happens a lot where they'll make an appointment and they come in town for the weekend and they leave with their piece.
There's really nothing to it. I mean, I landed into it and it was almost like I was born to do this. This man put the pressure on me. He says it's 9 o'clock, he's 8 stones, do 1 design or 2, whatever you think is best. He gave me the freedom. So it just came out to me. I was born to do this. I can do anything and everything. So I don't have a line per se because of that. So many different expertise and different people from different parts of the world, because I was also in contact with people from the Bahamas, from Grand Cayman, and all those things. I was doing designing for them too. And even from some jewelry stores in South America, because all the people from South America come to Miami being the center of the jewelry type of thing in there. You're the continuation of your past, and your past is your past. So from your past, you go into the moment, and from the moment, you go into the future.
He loves the challenge when people just give him a stone or 2 or whatever, and they say, use your imagination and make it yourself, whatever you want, whatever it comes to.
Then I go wild.
That's what he calls a juicy steak. But we've got people that come in all the time that say that people approach them and ask them, is that a Roberto piece? And that is validation right there of his hard work and the years that he's put into it.
It feels awesome, but at the end, it's not important to me really. At the end, I cannot take any of that with me. It's all ego anyways. It feels good, and all these pieces, the last 200-300 years have passed from mother to daughter to a granddaughter or whatever it is. And I would be history. I would be part of nothing. I will not exist anymore, and it will not even be a memory because it is what it is. That's what we go through this world, and we leave empty-handed, just like we came, and without really anything. So you leave your work, and that's what is left. So the sky is the limit. That's why I always say those are the visions that the Creator allowed me to see in His creation.
I grew up in the Chicago area, basically the west suburbs of Chicago, and I went to art school there at Columbia College in downtown Chicago. So I spent some time in the city, and the city to me is actually Chicago. I spent a number of years there, and then I decided to go and get my master's degree in costume history. Really, I wanted to do jewelry history, but that wasn't really a program that was offered, so I did costume history. And so I was at NYU, and they took me through to the Metropolitan Museum, and I was able to study the real clothes from the actual time periods and things of that nature. So that has always been a love for me. One of the reasons why you see historic aspects in my jewelry is because of that influence. From New York, I met my husband there, and we moved down to DC, where he was from. And I did theater, costumes for theater, for about 8 years. And then we decided to move down to Asheville, and it was bring your own job to Asheville. So I was like, okay, I'm going to go back to jewelry making. That was what I did in undergraduate school. I learned about a new medium called precious metal clay, and that became sort of what I ran with. I started a business with that, and I've been doing it ever since. So one of the programs that I did while I was at NYU was a decorative arts program, which is basically anything furniture, plates, anything that you decorate your life with. And what appealed to me the most was the arts and crafts era and the Art Nouveau era. So Art Nouveau is very swirly lines and nature inspired and things of that nature. And arts and crafts was really a reaction to the Industrial Revolution and getting back to making handcrafted items. And so both of those things in that time period really appealed to me in my aesthetic and in my work. I do a lot of, I've started a little Frank Lloyd Wright inspired stained glass series, and I do a lot of Art Nouveau shapes and things like that. A lot of people say Art Deco, and that's fine. It's, that was just the continuation of it as well. And I love being able to show that it was handmade. So each piece is still individually handcrafted by me, even though I may make it again and again. It is still, every single part of it is touched by my hands. So that is one of the best parts of it. The other aspect of my jewelry is the architectural aspect, making tiny birdhouses and little castles, and I have little cabins and cottages and little, I've got the Dutch colonial and the craftsman style house and the Cape Cod. And so I'm just having a lot of fun playing with three-dimensional objects and making them as wearable as possible. I often start with a symbol or an image or something that is part of the, the arts and crafts of the Art Nouveau motif. And then I will decide, okay, well, does it need a little negative space in there? Or does it need a little color? Or should I do it in bronze and copper? Or should I do it in silver? And decide from there. And then I actually create little stamps. So I make my own, they're called photopolymer plates. And they're really meant for letterpress or printmaking. You can take the image and you place it onto a stamp. Basically, you're exposing this UV sensitive material and putting your design over it. So whatever doesn't get exposed then scrubs away, and you have a deep impression that you can press into the clay. So the beginning of this is precious metal clay. So precious metal clay is actually silver particles suspended in a clay binder, so that you can sculpt it like clay, and then when you fire it, the clay part will burn completely away, and the metal particles will melt together, and you're left with a solid piece of silver. So you work the clay, you press the image into it, I carve it out from there, and then I let it dry. It needs to be completely dry before it goes in the kiln. Then it gets fired at the melting point of the silver. So at about 1650 degrees, that will allow the clay to burn away and the metal to come together. Then I have a solid piece of silver when I'm done. When it comes onto the kiln, it looks really bright white, and that's because all the particles have just come together for the first time. So we start brushing it down and burnishing it so that it starts to look like shiny silver again. And then I can either decide to put a patina on it, which would darken some of the recessed areas so that you can really see the detail, or I will go and I will put enamel on a piece so that you get color. and you get all sorts of depth and reflection in that color. And from there, I will take it down to my buffing wheel, shine it up, and it's ready to go. You put it on a chain, you put it on an earring wire, and they're ready to wear. So that's basically the process of making precious metal clay jewelry. The bronze and copper is a little bit more challenging because the firing process is a little more difficult to use. It basically is more challenging because the metal wants to oxidize as you're trying to fire it. So you just have to work with that, and it has its own set of rules. Being at the museum and actually being able to look at the real garments and see how they've survived through the years and how all of the handwork went into them was absolutely inspirational. Just being able to be surrounded by the history of it and learning how those things work together. I always joke that I got a history of the world through fashion. So we dressed in a way that reflected the times and that told us, you know, not only our place in the world, but how we were able to function in it. I mean, nowadays, no one would be caught dead wearing a corset daily. It's just, it's exhausting. And so it's really nice to be able to update these things and bring out historical aspects without feeling like, you know, I've lost the history of it. I always say that precious metal clay makes the impossible possible. Hi, I'm Amy Brandenburg of Amy Brandenburg Studio, and you can see my work at amybrandenburg.com.
I'm Julie Taylor with Pottery by Julie Taylor. I live in Franklin right now. I grew up in Michigan on a beautiful fruit farm. When I left Michigan after graduating, I moved to Florida, met my wonderful husband. We eventually opened a flower shop, so that's probably where I started some of my creativity. We had that a few years, and I decided to go back to school and get my teaching degree. So I taught school for 20 years, and we retired to the mountains here. And when I got here to the mountains, I knew I wanted to investigate pottery and working in clay. Nature inspires me a lot, and my love for animals inspires me. Even when I'm doing pieces that aren't sculptures, I like to sometimes add some little creatures in there, insects or bugs or little animals. So I would say that definitely nature, which I've had a love for all my life, and animals as well, a love for all my life. Because I do so many different pieces, you know, I do the sculpture, and then I also do wheel thrown, some functional work, but I would say that my specialty and the thing that I really have fun with the most are the critter lights, I call them. So I start those on the wheel, and I will throw a bottle form, and sometimes I'll have in mind, you know, what critter I want it to be. And because by that I have to decide, you know, the body shape. Is it going to be round and full, or is it going to be long and narrow? And definitely I like to do giraffes, so they have to have that bottleneck, has to be a long neck. And sometimes I don't. If for some reason that form isn't working for me, I'll just finish it the way it wants to be and set it aside, and then decide, you know, what kind of animal that looks like it needs to be. So I'll let the bottle shape form sit up and harden a little bit and get leather hard, and then I will hand build or sculpture build the head that goes with it. And I will also let that firm up a little bit. And then I'll attach the two. I'll attach the head to the neck part. And then I start adding details, the little faces. And a lot of times those little faces take on a life of their own. And then I add a little texture to the body before I make the holes. The holes are for the light to come through. The small ones I do only take a tea light, a small battery operated tea light. The larger ones I make a little notch in the back where it can be an electric light. And my husband, who is so gracious to help me, he helps me make little wooden bases, and we get just a little like Christmas tree type bulb on an electric cord, and it fits down in a little hole on the wooden bases. And people can purchase the electric bases if they'd like their little critter light to be electric. And then the glazing, I always have fun with the glazing and their little facial expressions. So I just like to have things kind of evolve with their personality and their facial expressions. Sometimes the little tilt of the head, if they're going to have the big wide eyes like they're looking at me for some direction. I do have one very special one. I call him Thank You for Sharing. And I guess he's special because of the inspiration I got to make him. I was volunteering at a art studio in downtown Franklin. Another artist, she had a little painting on the wall, and it was of a bear, and he was laying on his back, and he was holding a beehive. And I just looked at that little painting and I said, that looks like something I could do in clay. So I did. I made a sculpture piece of a bear, and he's laying on his back, and he's holding a beehive. I wanted a little bit different interest in it, so I decided to make the beehive out of paper mache. So I made the beehive out of paper mache, and then I made little bees out of clay. And after he was glaze fired, I attached the beehive, and then I attached the little bees to the beehive and attached a couple to him, one on his little toe. And his name is, he's just kind of thanking the bees for sharing the honey with him. And yeah, he's kind of special to me. Hi, my name is Julie Taylor with Pottery by Julie Taylor, and you can find me at my website, potterybyjulietaylor.com.
This musical moment is brought to you by Brian Bird from We Sell WNC Keller Williams Mountain Partners.
Hi, this is Brian Bird, and I love Hendo. I love this town, I love our community radio station, and I love all of the locally owned businesses that have taken the Safe Hendo Pledge while encouraging the community to embrace the 3 W's. Wear a mask, wait 6 feet apart, and wash your hands.
Brian Bird is a local real estate agent, still doing what he can to support local restaurants in town.
These are our friends and neighbors. And, we're going to do anything we can just to help them get through today.
My name is Brian Bird, realtor with the We Sell WNC team of Keller Williams Mountain Partners. If you want to learn more about real estate or this community, email me at Brian, that's Brian with a Y, briansellswnc@gmail.com, or visit WeSellWNCteam.com.
am from South Carolina, and I grew up with parents who collected Edgefield pottery, which I have always accredited with my interest in pottery from a young age. I used to play hide and seek in these giant storage ceramic barrels that could have paid for my college tuition. And I think a lot of my forms and my shape come from kind of a rejection of Edgefield pottery. Like, I don't want big brown pots. I want bright, colorful, feminine forms. My introduction into ceramics as a profession came from stumbling into a ceramics class at the University of South Carolina. I had no intention of making it a career. Like, learning sometimes can be difficult, and ceramics always came very intuitively. I had got my BFA in ceramics at the University of South Carolina, and then I got my master's degree from Kansas State University. When I left grad school, my work was all sculptural, and it had frills and embellishments, and they were very decadent pieces. And as I moved out of grad school and into my own spaces and had to schlep all that stuff across country, it became really important to, like, edit what is important to me. Like, how do I convey my interest in the feminine and my interest in speaking more clearly to people who like my work? Slowly but surely that became these like very hippie, feminine pottery forms, and using colors that spoke to that decoration that women use. So like black and white jewelry, or like making sure that the designs hit right on the hip of the form. The placement of the designs are very intentional, and the designs themselves I try to make very inviting and feminine as well. All of my wear is food safe, microwave safe, and dishwasher safe. It's also husband safe. I've really been moving into vases and planters because one of my hobbies is growing plants and flowers, and I love and spend so much time outside, and I realized I had no vases. I love plants, and I had no planters that I like. And there has been a kind of symbiotic relationship between like me learning what a good vase is for a certain flower that has informed the form and the color and the texture to create a really strong vase for, like, I like growing the brain celosia because they're called coxcombs. And like, how do I make a good vase for that form? I used to make vases with really wide mouths. That's a lot of time and effort to fill that vase and to make it look full. And so the vase that is photographed from my artist page, it's kind of the culmination of understanding that like the black needs to touch the flowers, not the white of the design, because I think the black allows the flowers to display themselves better. Because I've tried a couple where there's the white touching the flowers and then they kind of blend in and they can end up competing with each other. And so the vase that's photographed on the website is a narrow vase so that I can fill it with like 10 flowers instead of like 40 flowers. And I find that the way that the vase is weighted because of the design, like the black on top and the white on bottom, creates a much stronger composition overall. My work is customizable, and the reason that I allow for that on my website is because a lot of the joy that I derive from my own work is through experimenting with different colors and different shapes and different patterns. And in the beginning, when I first started making this work, it really was whatever spoke to me. And so I think a lot of times people will walk into my studio or walk into my booth and I won't have a piece with me that day, or that all of those pieces have sold out. And I don't think that should be a barrier for that person to not get the work that they want. And so that customization option really allows the customer to think about what works best for them. Sometimes the customer asks for things I've never even thought of. And I'm like, that's gonna look funny. And then it comes out and it's beautiful. And then I'm like, awesome. And it opens a new doorway in my brain for something I never even considered. I like to approach my wheel with purpose, my pottery wheel with purpose, because if I get on there without a sketch or without an idea, I can just kind of end up with stuff. And that's not really what I want to end up doing. So I always start sketching. I always make my sketchbook visible when I'm throwing so that I have a goal in mind. I always start with like 2 or 3 pieces that are kind of just throwaways so that I get used to making the form. I always call it like getting used to the dance of making that mug. Once I'm used to the form, I typically produce about 10 to 20 pieces with that form in mind. And then when I sit down to decorate, typically pick a color from my palette, either like black or the seafoam green that I use a lot. And I look at how the form is shaped, and I then apply the pattern in response to the shape. So oftentimes I need to know where the hip of the mug is, I need to know where the lip of the mug is, and I need to think about how I can enhance that, pull something forward or push something backwards in the composition with the pattern in mind. And then I apply paper decals that I cut out on a paper cutter that I have access to. And I apply slip, and it's usually 3 coats of slip, so that usually takes about a whole day of decorating. It's kind of mind numbing to put 3, seafoam green coats on, but it really makes a difference to have that time invested. And then my pieces are bisqued to 06. And then I take them out, and typically I will divide the design into like having different interior colors so that customers have their option of interior colors. So either like a dark teal or a rich maroon are typically my 2 base colors on the inside. And then I do a glaze firing, and then that's my process. Hello, I'm Ashley Paget from Greenville, South Carolina, and my website is ashleyceramics.com. You can find me at ACP Ceramics on Instagram as well.
When I was still in high school, and I don't want to date myself, but this was back in the mid-60s, acrylics was invented in the 40s, and in the 50s and in the 60s, an artist in Columbia, South Carolina by the name of Jay Barden became fairly well known for painting in acrylics. I'm in high school at Lexington High School, and I've made the decision to go into architecture. Why? Because at that time, without computers, it meant I could take my felt tip markers, my pen and ink, my graphite, my charcoal, and just find a blank piece of paper and create. So that's what I was going to do for a living, for a career, and I knew that art lessons would help. So I drove to Columbia, which was about 15 miles away, in high school after all of the high school stuff, and took lessons from Jay Barden at the Columbia Museum of Art. He was teaching acrylics. Fast forward, after about a 40-year career in architecture of creating, I was to the point where I'm punching keyboard keys and pushing a mouse and pushing papers. And so there's not that much creativity. I had my own firm, so I was doing more of that and just had to get back into the creative process. Not that we ever left it, it's just that it went digital with the computerization of the architectural profession, just like everything else. So I started picking up the brush again about 30 years into an architectural career. And the oil thing, and when I got back into it, what did I do? I started with acrylics and abstracts. But 4 or 5 or 6 years into the serious getting back connected with the fine arts, I did switch to oils, and that came about primarily because, just like acrylics with Jay Barden, it came about because of the classes I was taking at City Art in Columbia and multiple workshops all over the country. But what do I paint? Typically where we travel, and things that are outdoors are my forte. Yes, I've done portraits. Flowers are probably the thing I like best as far as still lifes. You know, set up a still life. I've got a light back here that I can actually set up a still life. My wife is great at that. So as far as what I paint, typically outdoor scenes, landscapes, and still life flowers. It starts with that emotional connection because I've been there, I've seen it, I've done it, I've heard it, I've smelled it. And to me, it's telling a story or retelling a story. So how do I know what to paint? I don't until I usually see it. For me, it has to be an emotional connection. And because I'm visual, I'm equally left brain, right brain. My studio, when you come in the front door, to the left is the business end, to the right is the end we're sitting in now. So even my studio is a left side, right side, and I'm equally comfortable in both sides. But as far as creating a painting, because I'm so visual when we travel, and we travel for the purpose of seeing things, but also just searching out places to paint in addition to just seeing them, I create an emotional connection with it. I even, you know, the 15 or 18 or 20 times I've been to California and just driven. California's a big state, as you know, but from San Diego all the way up past Mendocino, there are so many different things. We will buy typically a CD at the time and put it, not an 8-track, I'm not that old, it was at least a CD, and put it in the rental car. And the music that I'm listening to when we're going to, whether it's Yosemite or wherever, when I get back to the studio, if I've had the opportunity to do the plein air studies, I probably would have even picked up a rock or two if it was the color of the soil I was painting. And I'll put the CD in the CD player over there, although I just go to Spotify now. But all of that comes into play as far as being able to create. You know, the Grand Canyon was a good example. I had one of my favorite paintings is the plein air study at Grand Canyon, and then the studio piece created here. But I had to have the screeching eagles. I found a track, and the eagles and the hawks that you hear when you're spending 4 or 5 hours on the rim of the Grand Canyon. Was at Sundance painting before sunup, and the elks were bugling early on. The sun hadn't even come up. I'm by myself. I'm in my element in the woods. One of my favorite quotes, Degas, painting is easy when you don't know how, but very difficult when you do. And that is so true. And fortunately, I'm beginning to learn how little I know. So that means maybe I'm making some progress. Hello, my name is Ben Compton. My website is www.bencomptonart.com.
Courtney Holscher is a North Carolina educator. She has been teaching in North Carolina for 17 years. She has a degree in fine art education. She's also a member of the Artscape Banner Committee, where she handles their social media. Courtney has an extensive YouTube library of demonstrations.
Hi, I'm Courtney Holscher. I paint abstract acrylic landscapes like you see here. These are on display at Atomic Furnishing and Design of Nashville. I also have art on display at St. Paul Vineyards in Flat Rock, North Carolina, and at Greensboro College in Greensboro, North Carolina. I've been teaching art at the high school level at Hendersonville High School for 11 years, and before that I was at East Henderson High School, and I've been teaching in the state for 17 years. Okay, today we're going to try to sort of recreate a likeness to the painting I did that was 30 by 40 with a silver background. Got a lot of positive feedback on that one, so we're just gonna sort of do the same technique, same arrangement, same color scheme with that, and we'll see how it turns out. Black is first. Then our next darkest color, well, I guess the micaceous oxide and the brown, I'll show you, in value are, when I squint my eyes, they're about equally dark, but I'm going to do the micaceous oxide first and then go to all the warm tones. So my cool tones or colorless tones are together, and then my warm tones are together. So there's the micaceous oxide, which is really going to sing. I don't even know if it'll show up, but I do feel like it adds some variation to the tones. There's my brown. This is about the last of my gold, so hopefully, I don't know, hopefully that'll be enough. And iridescent pearl. Okay, now we'll do a swipe. This is really short. Straighten yourself out there. Ay, ay, ay. That was a lot of drips too. Because I put a lot of silver on there, that's why. There's a lot of silver on this background. Guess I'll do one on either side and then one in the middle. That's cool. One more. Shorty. Shouty. My high schoolers would grin. Well, whatever. This is how we do it. This is how we do it. Oh, that's really pretty. I don't want to mess that up. We'll go slightly this way. It's Friday night and I feel alright. The party's here on the west side. Boop. Okay. My initial reaction is that I want the silver to come back. I want more silver here and here. If you, that's pretty. I'm seeing gorgeous stuff. I'm even liking, the drips were crazy heavy this time because I really coated the canvas heavily with the silver. I wasn't messing around. I like that dip. This is growing on me quickly. I really like it. This is just the best color combination ever. Yay. It worked. 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 I like it. Yay. Oh man, I'm loving this. Pretty exciting. The glare is not doing us any favors at the moment, but maybe you can at least see some close-up shots. I really love that right there. That's really nice. And it's contrasted well with that area. I like the small and big drips. That is so cute. I love that little dip right there. And it's so high contrast. Like that's where the viewer's eye will be drawn. And it's so nice to have a specific spot of emphasis. I also really like the color formations in that area. My silver is coming back, so yay. It's a little more cells than I would like they sort of went overboard, but I'm not mad at them. Pretty, so pretty. Yay! Let you see it once it's dry. All right, so I'm really super excited about this one. It's got lots of neutral colors in it, lots of big cells and little cells, and gradations from pure black and white to browns and even golden oranges and yellows. I think this is my favorite ever. I'm just gonna go ahead and be honest. I love the high contrast in the horizon line. And I know some people have expressed that they don't like the drips. I like the drips. I feel like it's my little personal expression with this technique that a lot of people could recreate. That's the thing that's making it mine at the moment. I love how it looks like it's glowing here. I'm very happy. This whole thing just makes me so excited. Do a few close-up shots. And don't forget to check out my paintings and my merch like this shirt on seahulshart.com. Bye.
I was born in Illinois and I grew up in Indiana, and I was lucky enough to have had a fabulous art teacher in high school, and she helped me find Washington University in St. Louis. I've been drawing as long as I can remember. I graduated with a Bachelor of Fine Arts, major in graphic design, minor in illustration. And at one point, I actually broke away from art. And, a couple reasons here and there, but, there got to be a longing and a desire to get back to it. And so when my son went off to college, I sat down with my husband and I said, I always wanted to try painting. And so about 4 years ago, we took a leap of faith and I started painting and hitting the art festivals, and I'm not looking back. And so when I got into the painting 4 years ago, I started out with just the watercolor, but then this really cool thing was happening and all this alcohol ink was becoming available, and it works very similar to how a lot of watercolors paint to begin with. And so it was an easy transition for me to jump onto a newer form of painting, and it's just taken off for me. Probably the biggest shift is just devoting more time to it, honestly. I've noticed, the more you paint a subject, the more free-flowing it becomes for you, the more routine it becomes, the more comfortable you are painting it. The larger pieces I tend to do will be more slower and moving at first because they tend to be more original. I do a lot of smaller pieces over and over again. Like I paint tons of pumpkins. People like pumpkins. I like pumpkins. They're fun to paint. So I'll paint tons of pumpkins. Well, I paint those so quickly, it's no problem. A big painting, though, a new format composition, that's going to take time, and it's just a slower build up to the final piece. And I guess, ultimately, it's just finding the time to get the painting done is what's really changed more than anything. The funny thing is my husband's an engineer. Here I am, an art major. He's an engineer. So we're a good balance to each other. But he will constantly say to me, sketch it out before you start, Chris. And I'm like, yeah, no, I don't think so. So I tend to okay, I'm going to paint a beach scene, and I just start throwing on the paint. And I really just, I rarely ever sketch a painting out before I go. So I will just start painting. And as I tell him, I let the paint talk to me and tell me what to do, because that's how the nice thing with watercolors is, I work very wet on wet. So I wait for the colors to blend together on the paper and evaporate and do what they need to do. And you'll miss all the little subtleties that you don't know how the water's going to fade out. And if I sketch an area, that piece may be put off to the side that I really love, and I don't want to cover that one little magic of the watercolor up. So I can incorporate and adjust and move as I need to be. So typically, I start with an idea, but I never start with a layout. I just roll with it. I always have, my favorite pieces always change, it seems like. They're constantly changing. Right now, probably the piece I am fondest of is the one I've put up for the show, the tall autumn birches. And I've been playing with birch trees now for about a year, and I really love how the paints, you can mingle them and make them come across to be that birch tree. But I could never get my trees to fade into a background. I don't know what I was doing. It just wasn't working. It just wasn't working. I could put them as, in the foreground and they'd be fine, but I could not get it to move. And so I don't know what I was doing one day, and I thought, let's try this one thing, and what happens if I throw a little blue back here, and here's a pink, and oh my gosh, look, there's the sky, and here it comes, and or it could be a lake, whatever you want to see it as. And all of a sudden the tree started to move backwards, and it's like, okay, that worked. I got to remember it. And I think because of the colors, they incorporate a lot of colors in that painting, and it's so vibrant. But the fact that the trees move backwards and there's movement in it from that aspect, I love it. I just love it right now. This is just me and what I do, and I see it all the time, but I am always amazed that people love it as much as I do and want it to be a part of their lives. And it's thrilling. It's honestly a thrill for me. Hi, I'm Christina Bescher, and you can find my work at www.ChristinaBescherArt.com.
I have spent quite a few years, really almost all of my life, enjoying photography. I really started when I was 13. My parents gave me a little box Brownie camera then, and I got hooked. I spent my allowance on film, and I just couldn't stop taking pictures. My career before becoming a professional photographer was in computer software. So I was a computer technician or software guy for years, and I did that in California and San Francisco Bay Area, and moved back here 15 years ago and took up photography full time then. So, and a lot of my photography shoots are with a group. I take workshops out, and we find new places. And a lot of times I go back to the same places over and over again, and they're always different. The light is always different every time you go to a place, so you can never really repeat the experience. My mentors taught me one time is if you see a shot, you got to take it because it's not going to be there again. So I always go back to my favorite spots over and over again. And I've been all over the country too. So yeah, I've done weddings and family gatherings and reunions and things like that. So that's part of my business. You can really find interesting situations where light is striking things at angles, or light is coming through clouds, or light is coming, in an interesting, diffuse way. I started really seeing that. And when you start to really see that, then you can develop a style where you capture it. Light tells a story. If you just take a straight picture of the sunset, oftentimes you'll have a dark foreground. I'll use a technique called HDR, high dynamic range photography, to try to bring out the light in the foreground and the background at the same time. That's it's a way of combining photos. And I also do a little bit of contrast work. I think every photographer goes through a phase where you oversaturate. That's something that people do. You start out, you realize there's a saturation capability. You can make the reds redder and the oranges oranger, yellows yellower. You do that for a while. And then you start to back off from there and realize that that's a very blunt tool. So you want to use it very carefully. So I'll do that a little bit. I'll try to take out the fog a little bit with some of the tools that are in Photoshop. But I don't do a lot. I mean, I try. One of the things I learned early on is that you have to really capture the image in the field. You really have to see what you want and compose it. And then you use the post-processing as a way of just enhancing what your vision was, but not trying to create a vision in the post-process. There's one that I call God's Eye. Right. Well, that piece, I'm proud of that because it was one of those times I went up to the middle of the Smoky Mountain National Park at 4:30 in the morning, and got up there, and there was nothing but solid fog. The whole thing was fogged in. You could not see the hand in front of your face. But I was going to wait it out anyway, and the sun was going to rise at about 6, so I hung out and drank some coffee and waited. There's about 5 or 6 other photographers showed up there too, because it was a kind of a famous sunrise place. So I got there, and then at about 6 o'clock, when it was supposed to be sunrise, it looked like it wasn't going to happen. So everybody left, but I hung out there myself for a while longer, and just for about 15 minutes, the sky just opened up like that, and it gave me that opportunity to shoot that picture. So I'm pretty proud of that. A lot of people think, well, I can just pull up my iPhone and snap a picture. Sometimes that works, but most of the time, you don't quite get what you're looking for that way. And it is a form of art. So you're creating, and your camera is just your tool. It's like your paintbrush, and you have to first see what you want, and then use the tools and learn how to use the tools to make it happen. Take the time to compose your photo. I mean, don't just go out with the camera and just shoot everything you see. Think about it. You know, get into a place where you can imagine what you want, and then the camera you get as a beginning camera is, you know, you want to have certain features on it, but it doesn't have to be an expensive camera. The thing is, what you're trying to do is develop a sense for what it is you're trying to shoot. What is the photo about, and what are you looking for? You know, when I first started with my Brownie camera back when I was 13 years old, my first impulse was to shoot everything. I was just everything that looked interesting at all, I was just pointing and shooting, and that's how I got started. But it took me a while to learn that, you know, that's a lot of film to be wasted. You really want to think about what it is you want to see. What are you trying to say with the photo? Is the photo, it should tell a story of some kind. So what are you trying to do with the photo? And what do you want the people who look at the photo later to see? You know, are you trying to communicate something, a feeling, or something that you're trying to say with a photo? That's what takes time to develop. But as a beginner, you got to start thinking that way. And the seeing the results is a passion. It's something I just love to do. I can't say much more than that. My name is Drew Campbell, and my business is Drew Campbell Photography. You can find my work at www.drewcampbellpro.com or at various galleries in Western North Carolina.
Should show other people their art and like show the world their art. Yeah. Like get inspired, and then they get to realize that they have art here and that people will like it. My name is Alexander and I'm 10 years old.
It took me literally to get this pattern to where I liked it, what I saw. It took me 6 months.
He did a fantastic job. He even learned how to hollow them out so they don't go up in the kiln. And yeah, he's a fantastic sculptor.
Wings, the tail, and the beak with a line for the mouth. And I made the eyeballs blue.
So how does this apply to what you're learning in school?
It's like area, perimeter, and shapes.
I'm originally from Indiana, south of Indianapolis, and grew up on a corn farm. Knew that there was something broader in the world than corn. Went to school in Tennessee and came down to Athens, Georgia for graduate school and ended up staying here. I've been here since 1976. I had a gift shop and I noticed in all of the trade magazines there was a big resurgence of enameling products on the market, jewelry and other things, and it sort of piqued my interest. So that's when I went to John C. Campbell Folk School, took some introductory enameling classes where you enamel on squares and circles and moose-shaped things. And after I got tired of that, I decided to begin to learn how to make my own shapes and objects for the enamel. And then I went to graduate school and learned some other techniques, which led me to now when I mostly do kambu, which is a Korean technique. At first, when I was in school, of course, I had the latitude to be very creative. Once I got more into marketing my jewelry, I sort of centered in on a design. Right now, it's a lot of nature imagery, although I've always been influenced by nature, but not quite as strongly as I am now because it's a marketable imagery and it just reinforces the I do very repetitive imagery because it markets well. So I don't have as much leeway as I used to. And like I said, I specialize in a technique called kambu. It's a Korean technique where you take 24 karat gold foil and fuse it to a fine silver, which is 99% pure silver piece of metal. And you do that on an open hot plate with a burnishing tool that you press the two metals together at about 550 degrees, which is a little touchy sometimes. The two metals just bond at that temperature and under pressure. And then I scratch through the gold surface to create the imagery that I want on it, which is mostly right now flowers, botanical imagery. I have about 10 or 15 images that I do. And so once I've etched the image onto the piece through the gold layer, I then put it into a tarnishing substance that oxidizes the silver, which is what's been exposed when I scratch through the gold surface. And then once I get that to the color, it runs through a range of gold into purples and blues. And once I get the color I want on that, I pull it out of the liquid, dry it off, and then I put a sealant coat over the top, which will keep it from oxidizing anymore and changing the color. So it stabilizes the color, and then the piece is done. I also do some other techniques. I do an oxidized sterling technique where I scratch through the surface again, similar to the kambu, and expose bright, shiny silver, and again, put a finish coat on top, as well as other pieces with sterling and 14 karat gold filled. And a lot of that is textured pieces, and some incorporate pearls. The kambu pieces and the oxidized sterling pieces, I really do not want you to maintain them. They are pre-tarnished for your wearing convenience, I like to say. If you try to polish them, you will destroy the finish on them. So they need no caretaking, which is nice in this world. The other pieces, the sterling pieces, just the textured pieces with pearls and things will need polishing. The 14 karat gold fill pieces will not need polishing. Graduate school, I made a lot of things that aren't jewelry related that I'm very proud of. I've made lamps and vases and sculptural pieces that I don't market because they're part of my collection. I'm a big fan of arts and crafts period architecture. I'm sitting in an arts and crafts house right this minute, and I have 3 lamps that I've made in this room with me. And so I'm very proud of those. And then I did a series of arts and crafts jewelry back then too. That's some of my favorite work I did that incorporated wood and stones and some enameling on those pieces too, that were a lot more complex than what you see on my website. Although I've started doing some more complex pieces for sale. which then drives the price up. But then the person that's buying it is typically willing to pay it because they know it's a one-of-a-kind piece. So what I enjoy the most about doing this is when people enjoy my pieces and appreciate them for the amount of time and the effort that's put into them, and the aesthetics, especially. If they appreciate the aesthetics, I appreciate that feedback. Every purchase is definitely feedback, and positive feedback, and we really appreciate that. I'm sure all artists would say that. Hi, I'm Jim Norton from Athens, Georgia. I am Jim Norton Jewelry, and you may find me at jimnortonjewelry.com.
Well, I was originally born in New Jersey, lived several places around the country, and then landed in Atlanta, Georgia. Just a little over a year and a half ago, we decided it was time to get out of the city. And the house we had wasn't big enough for a studio, which was really a priority. So we found this house in Fletcher and we moved. And we built a beautiful studio here in the house where I could teach and do my art. I've been doing that ever since we got here. A little bit more about me. I was a marketing consultant before I gave up my career. And then I started dabbling in this art. I was never taught and never did art until late in life. And I met an artist and she said she teaches, and I resisted it. But my husband said, you should try it. I said, I've never done art. I've collected art. I was always a big art fan. But then I said, okay, I'll try it. And I've always loved mosaic art. That's been a favorite. So I tried it, and the rest is history. I did it increasingly as a hobby. And then last year, I told my husband, I think this is it. I think I need to go. I hate to say that I'm attracted to whimsy, because whimsy sometimes sounds trivial, but I look for joy and happiness in what I make. It fulfills me if it makes people happy. If I look at something, I want it to be colorful, I want it to be happy, and particularly when I started with mosaic shoes. I think, my company, my husband named it, it was called Cinderella Mosaics when I first started, because I felt it was a Cinderella story that I discovered this artistic talent I never knew I had. And I was making mosaic shoes because they're fun and they're whimsical and they're kind of over the top, and allowed me to do a lot of decorating, a lot of color, a lot of flamboyance. So when I make pieces, I love to make animals and birds and creatures that I feel need to come to life, to be beautiful. And so I cover them with beautiful clothing and decorations and eyes. And I like working with found objects, and I like working with jewelry and sparkly things. So I've found the pieces that will allow that to come to life. Like the mosaic florals that I make the teeny ones all the way to the big giant ones, because I think flowers are just glorious and majestic. And to make them with upcycled, repurposed things and make them beautiful, I love making mosaic florals. The mirrors, I was taught that art, and I took it to the next level, and I like the idea of decorating those borders so that when you're looking into a mirror, it just has pizzazz, sparkle and pizzazz and beauty. And the mirror is secondary, the mirror is just a part of it. The animals are my heart. I have, around my studio, if you look around my studio, I've got rabbits and cats and birds and pigs and fish, all waiting for me to make them beautiful and come to life. It's just a thing. I don't know. And I feel it sounds crazy, but I feel attached to them. I talk to them, and when I put the eyes on, they have personality. So it's a real emotional connection to the animals. And then I've tried my hand at other things. I've made wall plaques, I've made faces, and I want to challenge myself and keep going. I want to keep making things that that are not easy for me. I see something like a black canvas, a bear with no life. And another artist might cover him in brown and black and make him look real. My tendency, my love, is to make him a fantasy bear. So sparkly and interesting and smiling and, just bringing joy, bringing fun. That's my style. I've made a lot of things out of heirloom jewelry that people have had. I was very proud of a piece that a woman came to me with a bunch of her mother's jewelry. She was just put in a nursing home. And I created a piece of a long line of trees, and all the trees were made from the jewelry that her mother was wearing, and she brought it and hung it in her mother's room. I mean, that you can't say anything more about how gratifying that is. And I have made a lot of commission pieces. I have one woman who has given me a piece for both of her children. Now for her, I just made a unicorn for her granddaughter. And she gave me a huge paper mache elk that I covered for her room. I mean, she's just always, so yeah, I do a lot of commission. I love making commission work. I have workshops of different kinds. I have a workshop for the ladies in hats and the big beautiful birds, which are about 17 inches long. And so that's one workshop. I do birds and other creatures, which is where you can cover any kind of animal. I do mosaic florals, which are kind of signature. I do jeweled mirrors or jeweled treasure boxes. That's one workshop. And I think those are the main ones. And it's usually 2 days. I try to do the what I call the glass slippers workshop, where we make mosaic shoes out of regular normal shoes. And that's 2.5 days. And I try to do that once a year. And I take beginners all the way through to advanced people. It's so much fun. And, for the most part, I supply pretty much everything. It depends on the class, but I share all my glass and a bunch of beads and a bunch of broken jewelry and things like that. And we have a ball. We have a great time. I do have 2 workshops available online on my website, DeborahMajorMosaics.com, how to make a mosaic floral and how to make a jeweled mirror or treasure box. They're both available online for purchase, and you will have access to them for the rest of your living days. This art has given me so much joy and so much helped my self-esteem. It helped me feel like what was in me creatively had a showcase, had a place to come out. And when I see people come into my workshops, I want to bring that to them too. And so I'm very encouraging, and I'm very lighthearted about the way I teach. And when they achieve, accomplish something, and they're so happy about it, that's it for me. I mean, that's why I do it. Hi, I'm Deborah Major from Deborah Major Mosaics. You can find my work at www.deborahmajormosaics.com.
I grew up in Buffalo, New York, but escaped the Northeast and spent most of my career in Atlanta, and ended up in Hendersonville when I fell in love with Hendersonville. So I've been here now for about 10 years. I minored in art and majored in English at the State University of New York at Buffalo. And so I started my career in human resources and became an administrative director for Child and Family Services in Buffalo, and was responsible for their computer systems, and just became fascinated with the concept of computers. And that sort of launched me into, when we moved to Atlanta, I entered a technology company as a technical writer, and basically interpreted the instructions that our product engineers would write that no one could understand, and I made them understandable
and became familiar with the Adobe software products. And I realized that there was a path to my art through technology. And I finally landed a job with Adobe. So I worked with them for about 15 years and started painting more. I actually, when I traveled with Adobe, I used to take my watercolors. And one of the first paintings I ever showed in Atlanta was of the buildings in downtown San Jose where Adobe was located. And this building in downtown San Jose was next to a beautiful church with a big palm tree. So it was really a beautiful scene. And I showed that piece at the Atlanta Art Club's annual show and won an honorable mention. And I thought, okay, I'm finally recognized as an artist. I first started painting in oil and acrylic when I was in school. And then when I started traveling with work, I switched to watercolor, which is really a tough form of art. So I think it's a good one to really become accomplished at before you tackle some other mediums anyway. So really for about 10 years, that was all I did was watercolor. And my sister's an oil painter. She lives in California. And she really encouraged me to try acrylics. She said, you know, you like texture and you want to paint big. I really think you should try acrylics. So I said, okay, I'm going to go for it. So my initial acrylic paintings were really more traditional and didn't have the kind of texture that I have now. And I just kept playing with different styles and different techniques, and I kind of switched to mixed medium. And I embedded papers and fibers and bark off of trees and metal objects and all kinds of crazy things into very contemporary works. And when I started showing more of my work, people would ask questions about, will those things ever fall off of that canvas and that sort of thing. And I thought, okay, I'm going to find a way to do heavily textured acrylic paintings that look like things are embedded in them, but they're not. And that was really what led me to the style that I do now. So all of my texture where I'm pressing in wire and scraping and stamping and just using a lot of things to create texture was really to sort of imitate the mixed media style that I like looking at. So today, everything I do is just acrylic. As my interest in exploring more texture sort of took over, I started working more with palette knives and heavier bodied acrylics. And then I really found the concept of a heavy textured surface before I even painted. So my work became more abstract as I started to add more texture. But I still love flowers. So most of my paintings, if people see them in process, first they see a white, completely textured surface that's very abstract, and it's almost a work of art on its own. A lot of times people will say, oh, I love that white painting. And I'll explain, well, that's just a background and it's just texture. Then I do a very loose brushwork background painting that's very drippy and very abstract. And then I paint my flowers or my cityscapes with heavy-bodied acrylics, and they become more of the representational objects. So it's really an abstract texture, an abstract painting, and then a representational abstract composition on top of that surface. The piece that I feel most proud of in my entire career as an artist is a painting that I did right after 9/11. I planned to do a 5-foot wide by 4 foot tall painting of New York City. I was working in the mixed media mediums then. And I designed out the piece. My plan was to cut wire and paper, and every building in the skyline would be a unique surface. The colors were going to be very muted. And I first did a very small rendition of the painting, and the director of the Art League at that time saw me working on it and bought it before it was even finished. She was actually a native New Yorker. So I finished the little piece and then I worked on the big piece. And the big piece, the first time it was shown, was at the Huntinghorn Art Market in Hilton Head, and it won an honorable mention. The judge was the curator of the Telfair Museum, so that made me feel really special. And then the next place it was shown was at Spoleto in Charleston, and it was bought by a CPA firm in Washington, D.C., and went there and hangs in their entryway. So it was really a special painting, and it was on my website for a long time. I don't think it's there now. I'll have to get it back up, but it took me months to paint, and I sort of hated to part with it. In fact, I sort of wish I hadn't, but I was naive and I was really feeling the success of selling such a big piece. So it was probably my first really big sale of something significant. It makes me feel really good when I have sold a piece. Of course, it's great when you sell work, but when the customer sends me pictures of the piece hanging in their home, I do a lot of commission work. A lot of people will buy a piece for me at a show or in the gallery, and then they want something else. And I do a lot of commission work where I use technology actually to do mock-ups of people's spaces. And it's such a great experience to work with someone on a concept and then finish the piece, get it to them, and get to see it. A lot of times I actually deliver it and get to see where it's going to be hung. And then I'll get pictures and people will say things like, your work just brings so much joy to our home and that sort of thing. I feel like it's just such a wonderful connection. It's beyond just being recognized as an artist. It's having that sense of making someone feel good and being an important part of the world that they live in. It's very, very gratifying. It really is.
Hi, I'm Diane Dean. I'm an acrylic artist. You can see my artwork at my studio in Art Mob Studios in Marketplace in downtown Hendersonville and on my website, www.dianedean.com.
Thank you for tuning in to our virtual show, Art on Main, the virtual fine art and fine craft fair. Please go visit our artists in their virtual showrooms by going to www.artonmainNC.com. They'll be in their showrooms starting at 1 p.m. and we hope to see you there. Thank you for tuning in to our virtual show, Art on Main, the virtual fine art and fine craft fair. Please go visit our artists in their virtual showrooms by going to www.artonmainNC.com. They'll be in their showrooms starting at 1 p.m. and we hope to see you there. Thank you for tuning in to our virtual show, Art on Main, the virtual fine art and fine craft fair. Please go visit our artists in their virtual showrooms by going to www.artonmainNC.com. They'll be in their showrooms starting at 1 p.m. and we hope to see you there.